Consistent branding extends across these 5 areas. First, your logo, which is the image that you use to represent your brand. The colors you choose, whether those be in images or text or graphic design. The typography you use, which is essentially your fonts and the way you lay those fonts out on a page. And their messaging, which is what you say about your own brand as opposed to what anybody else might say about your brand. And your tone, how you say that stuff, whether you're very casual or very formal, whether you use proper words or whether you're very crass and use slang. All of that goes into creating a consistent brand. So let's take a look at this. Logo. Your logo itself has to be a representation, an embodiment of your core beliefs. Sometimes these logos are simple and seemingly timeless, like this one, the good old Nike swoosh. Now, how does the Nike swoosh tie back into the core beliefs, the why of Nike? Well, if I had to pick out what Nike's core values were, I would say they're probably something like this. Action, after all, just do it is their slogan. Achievement, athleticism, and victory. Um, and if you think about it, this logo itself actually embodies all of these things. Take achievement, for example, the idea of just doing something and getting it done, checking it off of your to-do list, right? We have this check mark literally in the logo. But it's not a boring old static check mark. No, it's a very dynamic, uh, athletic even looking check mark. You might even see it as the swooshing motion of an athlete performing. But the likeness doesn't stop there. This notion of victory, of winning, we can trace this tie all the way back to ancient Greece. This is a statue of Nike, the goddess of victory. And this was found in Ephesus, and it's one of the earliest known representations of this goddess of victory, named Nike, that we know of. And what's striking is, whether this is a subconscious tie or a deliberate one, you can actually find the Nike swoosh in this statue in several places. Um, and what's more, she seems to be presaging Michael Jordan in the good old Jumpman pose. And so you actually have a tie back all the way through ancient Greece to this notion of victory and the imagery that has come along with that notion of victory tied into the logo itself, into the swoosh. But something simple and timeless like this doesn't necessarily rule out more complicated logos or logos that even might have variation in them. For example, have you ever noticed that the Google logo is constantly changing? In fact, they often hold contests where they crowdsource um, logo possibilities, and they'll have regular people come up with these designs and submit them, and the winner gets to be the logo for the week or for the month or for the day. Now, again, how does this reflect the core beliefs, the core values, the why of Google? Well, Google has become synonymous with the internet, right? If you Google something, you are searching through a database of all of this crowdsourced knowledge that we've accumulated and stored on the internet. Google is the entirety of the internet. And so it becomes fitting in a way that the logo itself could actually be a crowdsourced version of the entire internet. Anything that is Googleable becomes fodder for the Google logo. And so they need very little consistency in their actual imagery in order to have consistency in their brand. In fact, all you really have to do is have something that looks roughly like this, and you can become the Google logo. And so by following that simple outline formula, you have all of these possible shapes and all these possible variations, and yet they're all still pointing back to this idea of the crowdsourced accumulation of anything on the internet, of all knowledge, of all um, information that you could possibly gather. Now I want to take a look at another logo. This is a group that I worked with, a nonprofit that I worked with a few years back, called Gravity Arts Initiatives. And what it is it's an arts nonprofit that seeks to catalyze a grassroots revitalization, community revitalization through the arts and innovation, as you'll see here in this tagline. And so naturally, the logo seeks to achieve that sense of revitalization through an artistic sense. This idea of causing an emanating ripple effect in your community, or the idea of leaping and creating motion, perhaps through dance. And the colorful, almost brushstroke like quality kind of evokes an artistic feel. Um, and of course, it's about the person. It's about empowering people and coming alongside people in order to revitalize not just an art scene in the abstract, but in the concrete, the way that it actually impacts people living in various cities and target areas. Now, once you get past the logo, we should talk about colors. These colors have been chosen in order to tie back into this artistic feel, this variety, the eclectic, multidisciplinary feel of our arts and innovation initiative, where we combine music and fine art and visual art, dance, literary arts, you name it, um, all with a sort of uplifting, vibrant feel to it. And these colors extend through all parts of our presence, um, even down to our banners. We'll put the strip of colors up on top of the banners, or our flyers, or our sign-up sheets. Everything is all saturated with these colors, even our fonts themselves. If you look at some of our other pages here, you'll even see some of the links themselves are in these different colors in order to keep the branding consistent. Essentially, once we've picked a palette, anytime we need colors, we have our go-to set and we don't have to start reinventing the wheel every single time. So how about typography? With Gravity, we decided on a couple fonts, which is usually a good idea. You want to generally keep your media presence to two fonts, maybe three fonts. One that's used for headlines, and one that's used for print body text, and one that's used for online body text. Um, and the difference is simple. For headlines, you want them to be big and bold, but for print, you want them to be much more easily legible. And if you use a headline text for a big body of print, or excuse me, for a big chunk of body text, you're going to get lost and not be able to see very easily what's being said. And the reason why you might need two instead of three, or why you would want three rather than two, is because you may want sans serif and serif options. Serifs are just fancy ways of saying these little curly Q doohickeys at the ends of letters. And studies have shown that serif fonts do really well on print. This is why newspapers use them, because your eye seems to be able to see these and move through the text much more easily in print. However, online on the computer, your eye gets bogged down in these little doohickeys and it becomes less legible. And so sans serif, sans being without those little doohickeys, becomes much more effective and much more legible online. So you may want a headline text and then one serif body option and one sans serif body option. With Gravity, we decided to go with Futura Condensed as our headline and Baskerville as our body text. And you can see that replicated throughout. So we have the Futura here and we have the Baskerville here. If we go in again to our initiatives, all the fonts you'll see is Futura. Here we've kept to a sans serif text, or Baskerville. Now, messaging. The About Us page is always a good place to look for messaging, because messaging is what you want to say about your own brand. So if we go to our About Us page, we see if we have done any justice to Simon Sinek's suggestions. And lo and behold, we start right off. Gravity is a nonprofit organization that fosters community revitalization through the arts and innovation. There's our tagline. And then the very next thing, we believe. We believe in the power of the arts to stimulate social and economic growth, cultural advancement, creative leadership, and a vibrant, flourishing community life. Our team is dedicated to breathing new life into communities through our collaborative grassroots approach to creative placemaking. Right off the bat, we're leading with our why. This is why we get up in the morning to do this, because we believe in the power of the arts to really make cultural and communal difference. Then what does this look like? So we can start looking at the how. How do we actually pull this off? And then the things you might see in a gravity town, what we actually do. So again, we're following his golden circle of why, how, what in our messaging. Lead with the why. And then tone. How do we sound when we're saying this? We wanted to strike a balance between being accessible and being professional. Oftentimes, it's hard to convince community members in positions of power, politicians, sponsors, and donors, that the arts are worth funding. So we had to take a position of authority where we gave a lot of information that backs up with hard research our claims to be able to revitalize communities. We wanted to sound like we knew what we were talking about. But we also wanted to sound accessible, because we want to bring people along with us. We want people to be able to come alongside us and feel like they're a part of it. So we often use more casual language in describing our initiatives, or in trying to get people to join us in becoming a creative catalyst in your city or community. All of this goes into trying to create consistency in your brand. And if you can, across all of the platforms that you occupy, if you can have consistent, recognizable presence with your logo, with your colors, with your typography, with the messaging you say, and with the tone with which you say it, you're going to be in a pretty good position to be able to build the clarity, the consistency, and the constancy that your brand requires.